Hello, everyone. We are in a new session of Tracts webinar. My name is Bahanu Nasia from Wonderland. I'm based in Vienna, and I have a guest from Czech. Ondr is at the Charles University. Ondr, would you present yourself a little bit?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for inviting me, Banur. I'm really happy to be part of this podcast series. My name is Ondřej Daniel, and I'm a historian at the Charles University working at the Department of History for several years now. And I'm focusing on cultural histories of the late state socialism, early post-socialism, so meaning late 80s, early 1990s, the periods around the changes, which were okay, political, economical, social, but also cultural, and that's why I'm here, and I'll try to speak about that.
You work a lot on subculture. Would you introduce us? Because I personally have no idea about what's going on in this field.
Yeah. So basically subcultures in with plural are well parts of the society. We can put it this way that somehow identify themselves, focusing on some sort of cultural styles or basic features, be it fashion, be it music, be it some other forms of the popular culture. And specifically, I will be focusing today on reggae, which is kind of a surprisingly implanted, which was surprisingly implanted in the 80s, first in Poland, but also in Czechoslovakia, partly in Eastern Europe. So we were in this very case we were trying to let's say speak about cultural transfer, circulation, adaptation of the subculture that was created elsewhere with well completely different, let's say, religious, racial, and social backgrounds, and was somehow adapted in the Czechoslovak space in the 1980s by musical enthusiasts. So that's the very case.
Very, very small question, because we are neighbors, kind of like, and you use the term Czechoslovakia. I wanted to know, are you working on the Czech field or really Czech and Slovakia? Or because there is a little bit difference in language, but I don't know how much in culture. So just a little explanation
Yeah,
on
that's
this
that's a
separation.
very good question. Thanks a lot for that one too. And yeah, actually, since we were working in the, but I am working with very closely with a Slovak colleague, Miro Michela, who is focusing more on the Slovak part. And we found out that until let's say 1992, we cannot really divide it too much, yeah, because there were first of all, there were basically there was the Socialist Federation that was bounding together. There were most of the let's say cultural references were same from both. But okay, definitely since the first third of the 1990s, with the creation of the independent states as a successor states of Czechoslovakia, there are well, new cultural, let's say, ways. And since then, we can speak about Czech and Slovak cultures. And this is also why, together with the colleague of mine that I was mentioning, Miroslav Michela, we have founded another sort of subcultural network focusing on punk. And now it's not a Czech and Slovak punk network, but it's Slovak and Czech in order to reverse it a little bit.
That looks very or sounds very, actually sounds very promising. Would you like to share your work with us? We would be very curious about that.
Sure. I just, if that would be okay, I would like to play a very short musical example in order to, yeah, to give you an idea what kind of things am I speaking about. So it's 1988 dub recording from Czechoslovakia, and now, okay, we can say it's a Czech part from of the Czechoslovakia then, and I'll just play a couple of seconds and try to follow up with the presentation.
I hope the sound will work to be shared. So fingers crossed. I'm really curious about, is it working on your end?
It does. So hopefully our viewers or listeners also have had the opportunity to listen a little bit of the tunes that were yeah linked with this um, first attempts to play Czechoslovak dub music. So I'll try to share the screen right now. I have no idea if you could hear anything before. If not, I'm really sorry about that. And we are testing it all the time again and again after so many years with online tools.
Unfortunately, we couldn't hear you, so we will think
And
about
can you hear
something
me
else.
now?
Now we can hear you very well. You are very prominent, but the music or the sub was not. Uh,
Okay, okay, okay. So I don't know. We cannot cut it anymore, but in this very case, okay, let's continue. I will try to play the musical example and we'll find out if that one will work, but that's the life. Okay, so the overall idea about this talk was to present an overview of how some particular cultural form can function differently in in some different contexts. So in this very moment, we are focusing on dub music, which is a offspring of let's say of the reggae cultures. And it was basically created through the music experimentation in the 1970s, especially with the DIY scenes of the studio recordings. That in many cases also had the level or the experimentation of the social resistance because it was often well one of the only ways how for the people to express their agency through music, through recordings, and through let's say political action that was also linked with dub and reggae. So altogether, I was trying to focus, and now you can see a so why I'm speaking in plural. We were working on this very research together with Miro, and I have followed a little bit more on this kind of dub part. We were trying to question how reggae got implanted into the Czechoslovak space in the 1980s and 70s. In the so we can see the book that was published last year in the UK where we had a chapter on that, and if you are interested, you can try to read it. We try to frame it along the three main axes. That would it be solidarity, revolt, and exotism. And in this very case, I will try to focus on the first two of them. Well, it's not possible to exclude the third one, while as I said, it's a big kind of translation. What is particularly interesting on DAP is that it is merging both. It is merging this kind of technological experimentation, but also issues of spirituality, let's say in the origins that would be the Rastafarianism. In its later translations into the Czechoslovak space in the 80s, it would be more kind of New Age related beliefs and thoughts. So I was particularly interested, and I'll try to focus here on the entry point. So how the DAP got into Czechoslovakia, how it evolved, and what specificities are there in its overall understanding in the 80s and 90s Czechoslovakia. Basically, I've tried to follow two main informers or informants, both of whom were active musicians in the half of the 1980s. And we can say it's few of informers, but in this very case, they were very influential ones that have influenced also fans of this music, which was never kind of a massive enterprise. It was more kind of a niche. And first of whom is this the first picture Jan Maxa at the top, who is currently working for the Czechoslovak television as a program kind of organizer. And the second one is a musician, Karel Babuliak, who is, well, he was a musician until nowadays, and he has never changed this kind of musical trait. So it's basically the first generation who was active since the very early 1980s. In this, let's say, Czechoslovak alternative independent music that somehow, okay, was not necessarily anti regime, but it was not neither very much pro regime. So it was in this very kind of, I could call it, gray zone, with the people that were active sometimes on the in this dissident circles, but sometimes also in the official organizations such as Socialist Youth Union, that was preparation for the Communist Party. So okay, you could see both, yeah, and somehow it's providing a more plastic picture what basically popular music production and practice in Czechoslovakia in the second half of the 1980s was. So basically, I have done a very thorough interviews with those two people and followed up with several others later, but I'm focusing only on them. And I was interested, first of all, on how did they get known, DAP, yeah, as a musical expression, as an experimentation. What kind of semantic, let's say, connections could they put together? If there are some sort of specificities in this, we can call it authoritarian regime, yeah, in the 80s and throughout the changes from the 80s until the 90s with. With the democratization, with the globalization, with Czechoslovakia and later Czech and Slovak republics approaching let's say the capitalist mode of production and so on. So that's and lately in the interviews, I was also interested in what kind of emotions does the DAP, let's say, aesthetics had for them, and if they could relate to those translations across the Atlantic space, across the different, let's say, racialized spaces that I was speaking about in the beginning. So that's basically what it was. This is how the let's say reggae scenes and the dub scenes on the margins of the reggae scenes looked in the 1980s. So from the pictures that we can see on from the traces, we can see that it was basically a part of this, we can say, a new wave of post-punk movement getting let's say inspirations especially from the UK early 1980s music bands such as, for example, Police, that was also playing some sort of reggae tunes in order not, I mean, to be able to attract some other audience that was basically this very dark English or North England punk style, yeah. So it was a way how to let's say make some sort of hybrids between the Jamaican music and the English music, together with its local appropriations in the Czech space that were especially started since the half of the 1980s. In Prague, so as we said, in Bratislava, it was a little bit different because it was also together with the second or the third largest Czechoslovak city of Brno. It was close to the Austrian border, and the people could somehow follow the Austrian radio and the television if they could find some popular music there. And early 1980s, so you could see in Bratislava there was this ska craze, focused or fueled by the Austrian radio, especially the RF Dry at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And in Prague, the situation was a little bit different. You could also have, for example, if you were interested, the West German radio, but it was never a mass thing then. Yeah, it was more for the people who were yeah, more focused on the radio technique. And the one of the ways how to get acquainted with the popular music in Prague would be the visits of the libraries of the institutes, be the British one, be the French one, but also, for example, the Polish one, yeah, which was an important way how to get acquainted by how to get known, how to get uh, informed by what was happening in the popular music in the half of the 1980s. So you could see the bands that were found in the 1983, 1984, 1985 in Prague had pretty much this kind of Polish link and were inspired by very particular situation in Poland in the 1980s. There was a martial law in the beginning. There was a sort of a very drastic, yeah, political situation that at the same time had or was very authoritarian, but also very vivid and very culturally active. Yeah, so that was basically translated, and it's very interesting how the reggae got translated from Jamaica to England, from England to Poland, and from Poland to Czechoslovakia, because let's see what how many four transfers. And we can say that many things got lost through these transfers, but we can say the main inspirations for the dub music were definitely there. So we can say the early 1970s Jamaican artists. I'm putting here Bob Marley, but of course there were the sound engineers such as Lee Scratch Perry or King Tubby, who were little by little known also in Czechoslovakia, but definitely it was more this kind of English link, and especially the early 1980s dub in England, as I'm putting the name of Linton Kwesi Johnson, one of those dub poets, really playing with the language and putting a lot of social commentaries into the text. And especially translation through Poland of this kind of already British music, be it with the names of Robert Brilewski, who's the person at the top, but also uh, in many kind of nameless and forgotten collectives, such as the pictures of the people you can see just behind, which were merging this kind of hippie spirituality and practice together with, let's say, new input of those cross-Atlantic inspirations from Jamaica. So you can see all this kind of yeah ecosystem being put together. Especially yeah with some influences I'm putting here of punk, new wave, alternative, and spiritual music. But we have to keep in mind that during the state socialist times, the push to productivity was not that strong as in the capitalist system. So we can see that people had a lot of free time, and there was definitely a sort of frustration with what was happening in be it in Poland or in Czechoslovakia then. But there was still a sort of hope of the alternative, of some sort of playing with humor, with some sort of absurdity, and it was a very kind of vivid ecosystem that enabled many subcultures, not only this one, to flourish. Yeah, so that was how the I'm putting here on the slide the DIY technicians, the culture of the free time. So it all meshed together because the people had time to play with with music, with the sound, in order to make it as to their likes. And now who knows if you will hear me? So I wanted to put the first dub record that was oh gosh, that was uh, so if I oh no, I cannot do this now. Okay, let me do that. That was released in 1986 Poland, just in order to give you an idea of what I'm speaking about. Which was the 1986 Israel the band called Israel record Nabi Fire. So load up your smoke, and I just put again couple of seconds in order to make it here. And if I can ask you if you hear anything now, and you should hear little by little. So you normally should hear some drums now. Yeah, so hopefully there
We
are
do.
some drums.
We
This
do.
is this kind of Nyabingi ritual of the Jamaican, let's say, artist, played by the Polish band called Israel, and getting into what we would call a dub opening. And the dub sounded like this. So it's you can see it's a very calm and relaxing music, basically. And so that was the very first recording. And in order to continue, and now I see something else that I should see. So one more second, please. And here we come again. So hopefully we are as we should be. So focusing on this, and it's small again, and I have another thing open. So why is this not working? Close stack and like this, hopefully. Yes, so now I see you and not the pro. Okay. So I was trying to make it bigger, but it doesn't work bigger. So this is basically how the okay 1987, 1988 Czechoslovak reggae and dub looked like. It was pretty much linked with this person that you can see here in the middle, Aleš Drvota, who was an active musician and a singer, focusing not only on Jamaican music but also on African ones. So you can see a lot of inspirations from this Western African juju music, for example. And getting to that, so getting to the results of the on the interviews I was doing, for my informants, the dub music, as naked as it can seem, very minimalistic, is or was for them an archetype of sound. So it made a very pure and nude rhythm, and they said it was a reply for them to the exhaustion of the pop music. So according to their understanding, the pop music or the popular music, rock music, post-punk, punk, and all that thing has exhausted itself because it was so orchestral, it was so put in so much into this production. So you can imagine this like 1970s jazz rock or 80s, early 80s bands such as Pink Floyd playing with this enormous instrumentation. But they say, okay, there was something else that was needed by the half of the 80s. It was this minimalism. It was a way how to dissolve one's ego or oneself in the music, focusing on the very, let's say, rhythm and the bass that is prominent. And so this is why I'm putting the bass vectors with some specific also sound engineering, be it echo that is widely used in dub, be delay with a delayed sound that you see hear something a little bit later, or beat reverse, or putting the music the other way around. And you can see a lot of those things like being enabled also by a technological development then. So we can see there's a lot of progress in this mastering, filtering, but also in the distribution of the cassettes or micro cassette players then, and especially copying from one place to another. And little by little, we can see also the specialization by some of those people trying to, well, make their living out of their knowledge that was acquainted through the DIY scenes. So some of which would also, start their own businesses. But we have to keep in mind that to the difference that we are experiencing basically in the electronic and dance music right now. There were no sound systems specially dedicated for the dub music or for any other electronic music until the early 1990s with the rave, which is another subculture that has followed basically this. All together with these emotions and with the imaginaries linked with the dub music and with reggae also, there is definitely a central role of marijuana or ganja, as I put here, that somehow has I would say important imprint on the dub music, especially in those let's say auditive kind of imaginary landscapes, on those quasi hallucination style or aural hallucinations that is played in the dub. But we cannot say it's only a drug related music. There is also this strong push of the meditation. So you can see that the my second informer nowadays has turned into basically a play of the meditative music and focusing not so much on dub anymore, but on this yeah, kind of spiritual part of it. So you can see, okay, the dub it was institutionalized. Let's say by the end of the 1980s, by with recording of the first official, let's say, dub album. So you can see the Hypnotics would be the first band to have a really professional album then. And altogether, just to wrap it up, so you can see that it's a sort of an adaptation of the Jamaican experience, yeah, and it can be, despite the fact that it has been importantly whitened in Czechoslovakia in the 1980s. It has been importantly also gentrified, if you can put it this way, because the, let's say, social exclusion or the marginalization of the original creators of dub music in Jamaica was somehow put aside, and it was much more linked with the aesthetics of dub. But nevertheless, there is this kind of there's this kind of let's say global or more overarching kind of aesthetic that is also putting in this yeah that is put in one of the words of my informers as this I'm no Rastafari, but this word is a real Babylon. So there were the inspirations that were much beyond just the aesthetics. Also, I was trying to focus on what exactly this Babylon meant from them. So in the late 1980s, it was probably linked also with somehow this state socialist regime that was probably also for its citizens then understood as something very decadent and being something very formal with no basically background for many of them in reality, and many things were done just on the paper, but in reality it was something else and so on. So that was Babylon then. But most of my informers said that there is another Babylon now, which is much more linked with let's say the commodification, commercialization, and so on. And I was trying to find out in reggae and in Rasta, since you have this dichotomy between Babylon, which is the wrong part that should be somehow destroyed, and the Zion, which is an ideal, let's say, place or ideal state of what would happen. So for my informers, it was never evident what should this Zion be like, and it should be, and for them, it's maybe also linked with the cultures of individualism that they were raised with. So it's more linked with some sort of individual autonomy and not so much with the collective one. And another kind of interesting result I have found out was about, well, again, with this multiple transfer, there is a lot of exotization going on in the game, in the place. So we can see also some attempts to use this kind of Jamaican pidgin of English, which did not work very well because okay, the people did not know it neither, and it was not their language and so on. But they somehow tried it. And in some other cases, they have tried to create their own languages that were basically also based on some sort of pidgin, but were completely made up. Yeah, so that's what I was, and this is how it looks now. So this is one of those informers playing again on this central flute instrument for the dub sounds also beyond the bass and beyond the drums. But we have to keep in mind that this first generation was definitely overcome by the following ones that were pretty much more linked with the internationalization of those different scenes. They were active already in the UK. They had the first-hand experience. They didn't need Poland for the transfer anymore. And interestingly, those two generations know nothing about themselves. So it is really interesting that if even they are trying to relate to the very similar musical and lifestyle form, they basically are completely uninformed, and this is where our aim as historians comes to and say, look, there was already somebody doing this a little bit earlier and differently. Yeah, so this is it. Thanks a lot. Sorry for the sound. I hope it's gonna be better, but it's not as it is.
I have a question. I mean, it's maybe unfair comparison, but I assume that a lot of people can relate. Um, for the Berlin Wall fall, the Wind of Change song was kind of like a symbol of unification and so on. Do you think there was a role or an impact by the subculture to the movements or to steer the interest of people in Czechoslovakia towards the international cultures or external, I mean, Africa and so on. Do you think there was a impact, uh, influence, maybe not like in revolution, but maybe in other ways?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's probably also not only the question of this, as you say, window of changes of the turn of the 1980s, 1990s, but it was maybe longer term. So you could see, okay, we can start in the 60s, yeah, with the opening towards rock and maybe folk music, the protest songs, and so on. In Czechoslovakia, namely, there was this push after the 1968 invasion of the Warsaw Pact armies of the Prague Spring, and there was something what they call the normalization. So there was a push for some sort of bands not to be that prominent, and it had especially this relation to the psychedelic rock band Plastic People of the Universe that was banned, and it had some sort of legal problems and this, but it's a generation thing. So you could see at the end of the 1970s, completely new generation trying to get into the maybe punk scenes that put them maybe not consciously but indirectly against the regime. Yeah, and they were somehow very prominent also in those demonstrations in the 1980s in Czechoslovakia, but also in Poland. Whereas, for example, hippies and dubheads would be I would say, okay, there were not that many, first of all. There were more hippies than dubheads. But also given the fact that a lot of the things are kind of dreamy and they are somehow detached from the concrete grounds and realities, that would not be the people who would be the most active in the changes, which is maybe not true for all my informants because both of them were quite active, but it's maybe linked with the fans. Yeah, so yes, the subculture played an important role. It was not definitely the only one, but it was also one of those metaphors that Czechoslovakia is an isolated country. It is lagging behind many other countries in the region, and it put them, yeah, into a opposition, I would say.
And how marginalized were the people? That's kind of like I imagine the Czechoslovakia back then. You had the one culture which was kind of like promoted in TV and school and so on in all the institutions. Then you had those subcultures which were probably not shown in TV, and but where the people kind of like followed. It could be also in terms of drugs, or were the concerts or the gatherings totally informal or announced, or how can one imagine?
hmm Yeah, that's a very important question, and thanks a lot for that one too. I would say there is a very important change with the perestroika period in 1986 and 7 and later. Yeah, so starting from the, let's say, final 4 or 5 years of the communist dictatorship in Czechoslovakia, the things got completely out of hand. So, well, okay, the party tried to control somehow, and it also turned into a kind of aggressive phase in the very final years and months. But we have to keep in mind that most of those bands I was showing were parts of the official events also, yeah, organized by some parts of the regime, we can put it this way, yeah, be it some sort of informal organization which was official, but and so on and so on. And speaking about the, let's say, repression, there would be definitely the year 1983, which would be important for punk and post-punk movement. So many of those informers also remembered the 83, there was especially this kind of operation of the state socialist secret police against the informal youth. They called it this way. But it was not led against I mean, there were only a handful of the reggae bands then, so only some of them had some sort of problems. But as you asked, for the drugs, actually, it was interesting to see that there was almost no knowledge from the socialist authorities that there was some drug issue or something with drugs was happening. Yeah, so it was only in the first third of the 1980s that when some investigative journalists tried to show that there is something going on, and especially they were focusing on synthetic drugs, on amphetamines that had nothing to do with this scene, for example. So they basically enjoyed some sort of informal isolation also. So yeah, altogether.
Thank you very much, Andre. I think this is a piece of history which re is not so known, and it's really cool for me, at least, as a neighboring country. Thank you for being my guest today. Is there anything you would like to share or invite the viewers as last, yeah, things to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot. It was a really pleasure also discussing with you. I had made my mind also a little bit differently when doing the presentation. It's gonna be better next time. But
Very well.
in any case, I would like to, yeah, invite our colleagues who are interested. We will be organizing in May 2026 well, I would say, big conference on electronic and dance music scenes in Prague. So in the second half of May. I will be probably also focusing on these very initial parts or histories of electronic and dance music in Czechoslovakia. So feel free to reach out, and I also promise some music there, which we were lacking today.
Wonderful. So everyone heard your invitation, and we would be happy to join you. Thank you for being my guest, and thank you all for watching. And yeah, hope to see you next time in a new webinar.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.